Hey guys, welcome back to Sparkman Homestead. I am back with another week's worth of meals for you guys. We are back from vacation and I'm so excited to be back in my kitchen and making good, healthy meals for us. So my kids are on their final week of summer vacation, so I'm trying to get them more involved in the kitchen with me. I'm trying to teach them some really basic cooking skills. They are definitely older, but they are more now interested in being in the kitchen with me, so perfect opportunity to teach them some really good meals. So the very first meal that me and my daughter are making is a mini barbecue bacon cheddar meatloaf. She's actually going to be doing most of the work here. I am in the background just kind of telling her what to do. So it's different hands this time. So what she's doing here is I had pre-cooked some bacon. I cooked about 12 ounces of just a regular thick cut bacon, and she is crumbling this bacon up for me. You can probably use any type of different style bacon if you would like in this. It doesn't necessarily need to be pork. I would imagine that turkey bacon would probably taste pretty good also in this. So for this recipe, I have my oven preheated at 425 degrees. In a large mixing bowl, what we're going to do is add 2 pounds of ground beef. Again, this recipe probably very interchangeable. You could probably use any type of ground meat that you would like. You could get away with turkey or chicken in this. If you are using chicken, I would probably try to add a different fat source in here because it probably would be pretty lean. So she is adding some chili sauce here. Now the recipe calls for 6 ounces of chili sauce. It doesn't really specify what kind. So I didn't want to put a full 6 ounce in here because I thought that was going to be like fire hot. So I just told her to put a couple of scoops in, and it did have a nice level of heat and it wasn't too much. So probably in this recipe, just do it how you would like your heatness level. So she is also adding the bacon here. Now we didn't use the full 12 ounces. The recipe calls for 4 slices of the thick bacon. We just kind of eyeballed it and added what we think we would like. And we are adding in 1.5 cups of a cheese blend here. This is just a marbled cheese, so it's a mix of a couple of different kinds. You can use, again, whatever cheese you like. I really just use recipes as kind of like a base recipe and just do what I have available for them, and they usually, not always, end up tasting okay. So we added 1/2 cup of our sourdough breadcrumbs there. You can use the panko breadcrumbs in this also. I just have sourdough available. She is taking 2 large eggs there and just lightly beating them, and she's gonna add those eggs to the bowl. Then what we're gonna add is 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of seasoning salt. This is just a seasoning salt that I made. It's just an incorporation of different flavors. I can't remember where I got the recipe for it, but it tastes delicious. And then we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. Now I told her just to pour with her heart. Start with the 2 tablespoons, but I always add, especially when doing anything with beef, I always add more Worcestershire flavoring because we really, really like that. And then we're gonna add 1 teaspoon of granulated garlic as well, 1 teaspoon of my homemade yellow mustard. I do have a video showing you guys how I make that yellow mustard. It's really, really good. We like a more vinegary mustard, so this has the perfect tang to it. And then I am getting her to do all the messy work, and she's just mixing everything until it's really well incorporated. So on a lined cookie sheet, and I definitely recommend using a rimmed cookie sheet because depending on what type of cut of meat you're using, like I used a ground beef here and it wasn't a super lean one, and it a lot of grease. And had I not been using a rimmed one, I would have had a huge mess in my oven. So definitely recommend using a rimmed baking sheet here. We're just taking that mixture and we are dividing it into 8 round loaves. We weren't too particular on making sure they were equal. We just kind of eyeballed it. And then you are going to push a small depression into the middle of each of the meatloafs. And then you're just gonna brush it with some barbecue sauce. I'm just using some homemade Sweet Baby Ray's sauce here. Again, I do have a video linking it. This is our favorite barbecue sauce. Tastes delicious. And we ended up using all the barbecue sauce, so I wasn't too concerned about her dipping the brush in and out because, again, we used the whole jar for this. So you're gonna brush them and then you're going to bake them in the oven for 25 minutes. After 25 minutes, you're going to turn it on broiler so that they can brown up that barbecue sauce on it for about 5 minutes. Then once you take them out, you're going to let them rest for 5 minutes. As a side, I wanted to do some tater tots here. Quick and easy air fryer recipe. You just take the tater tots, lightly coat them in whatever seasoning you like. We just like a avocado oil with some seasoning salt. You're gonna preheat the air fryer. I believe it was at 375 or 360. I can't remember which one it was. And you're just gonna preheat your air fryer for 7 minutes. After the 7 minutes, you're gonna add the tater tots in and cook them for about 12 minutes and just shake them halfway. As our vegetable side, we are going to have some shishito peppers. My garden is now just pumping out those peppers. So this is our favorite summertime meal, is shishito peppers with a garlic aioli. So my daughter is just making up a quick aioli sauce here. We're just using some homemade mayonnaise, a couple teaspoons of some minced garlic there, probably I would say maybe 2 teaspoons of a smoked paprika and a pinch of salt and pepper, and then you're also going to use some lime juice. I would say maybe we use about 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons of lime juice. You're just going to whisk it up, and then I was doing little taste tests just to make sure that it was tasting right. So we got that all done. So this is all of my shishito peppers that I had picked that day from the garden. We didn't end up eating them all, but this is what we did end up eating. So what she's doing is she is just taking a fork and she's piercing all around the shishito peppers. I've never had it happen without piercing them, but I have heard if you don't pierce them, they can explode in the pan because you are heating them at such a high heat. So rather than me experimenting to see if that's going to happen, we decided to pierce them. So I have 2 cast iron skillets here, and we have them turned on a really high heat, and we just put some avocado oil in the bottom of them. And what we're doing is we're pretty much just burning them. Well, not burning them, but we're blistering them on all sides of them. Your kitchen gets really, really smoky when doing this, so definitely open some windows. That's what they look like when they are all done, and then we are just going to coat them with some flaked salt, and that is all you need to do. These are perfect dipped with that garlic aioli. Here are the meatloafs coming out of the oven. You can see all of that grease on there, and that's why I strongly recommend using a rimmed baking sheet. So I'm just getting all of my stuff plated up. This recipe was better than I expected, and I definitely recommend it. I will leave the recipe linked for this in the video description, and any other recipes that I actually have a recipe for, I will leave them linked for you guys below. For the next meal, I am having my son help me with this one, and he is going to be doing all of the work. I'm just going to be standing back again, just kind of showing him how to do things. So we are making a garlic parmesan chicken skewer. This recipe, I cannot recommend it enough. It was so delicious. Definitely going into my rotation. Everyone loved this. So in a mixing bowl here, what he is doing is he is just making up the chicken seasoning. So we doubled this recipe, so you're just seeing him add 1 portion of it, but we ended up adding more later on. So he made the chicken seasoning with 2 teaspoons of paprika, 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, half a teaspoon of salt, and half a teaspoon of pepper. He is taking some chicken breasts there and just cutting them into strips. We did pretty big strips and they cooked perfect. Once he gets everything cut up, he's gonna add them to the mixing bowl with about 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and then he's gonna sprinkle that seasoning on top and just get everything incorporated. Now in this recipe, you can use wooden skewers. If you are using the wooden skewers, let them soak for 30 minutes before you are gonna use them. That way they don't burn, but I have these reusable metal ones and they work perfect. So what he's doing there is just getting all of the chicken skewered up. Now, while the chicken is resting, we are going to get the garlic parmesan butter sauce prepared. So he is taking 1 stick of butter, or 8 tablespoons of butter, and then he is going to melt all of that butter, and then he is going to add half a cup of grated Parmesan cheese. We're just using the pre-grated stuff. Now, one thing with cooking with kids is they don't always do things neatly, and he probably gets that from me, so we just had to clean up a little spill there. He's gonna add 1 tablespoon of hot sauce. We just used a sriracha, and he's going to add 8 to 10 cloves of minced garlic and 1/3 cup of fresh parsley minced. Now we just used dry parsley and it turned out perfectly fine. The recipe calls to use 2 teaspoons of red pepper flakes. We actually only used half a teaspoon because I didn't want it to be too spicy for the kids. I would probably go back, and even my son said it could have stood to be a little bit more spicier, so maybe add whatever you like for your heat. So we took the garlic butter sauce there and we just put it on all of the chicken skewers, like coated it really well. Now we have our oven preheated. You can actually make this recipe in the air fryer as well, but we were doing the oven portion of it. So we have our oven preheated at 450 degrees. So after we get all of that parmesan on there, we're gonna put them in the oven. And we put them in for about 14 minutes, then we pulled them out, added a little bit more garlic seasoning or that butter garlic sauce to the other half of the chicken, and then we put it in for about 5 more minutes. And then when we took it out, we coated it with even more. Now, one thing that I was doing on the side there is I was just taking a couple cans of our canned corn and just reheating or just heating it up so that we could have that on the side. I also made some rice earlier on in the day, just some plain rice, white rice, so we had that on the side. This recipe, I cannot recommend it enough. It was so delicious. Like, we did not have leftovers because everyone had seconds of it. But again, recipe will be linked for you guys in the video description. Such a winner recipe. For the next meal, I am gonna make a really quick and easy recipe. It is just a garlic steak bite. I'm just cutting up some zucchinis here. My zucchini plants have finally died. So this is probably the last zucchini side that you guys are gonna see. And I'm very thankful that we got a good harvest this year, but we are definitely done with zucchinis. So I'm just cutting them up into little strips here. I'm gonna season these guys with a little bit of avocado oil and some of this Trader Joe's onion seasoning. It's kind of like an onion salt. And I'm just gonna stir the oil and just keep adding the seasoning until I think that they're good and coated. You really want to flavor zucchinis pretty heavily. So I have a couple bags of gnocchis here that I had to get used in my freezer, so I'm just lightly boiling them. I don't want to cook them too much. I just want them to be lightly cooked. So for the garlic bites, I am just going to use a sirloin tip steak here, and I'm just cutting it into about 1-inch cubes. I'm going to get the steaks good and coated with some salt and pepper. You want to heavily season them. The gnocchi is done cooking, so I'm just gonna get that strained. And then I'm gonna add about 3 tablespoons of butter to a skillet. And then these right here are just some olive oil basil cubes that I made up last year. I actually need to make some more. All I do is I take either an avocado oil or olive oil, throw them in some ice cube trays, and then just take some sliced basil, and then you just freeze it and then pop them out of the ice cube trays. It's such an easy way to preserve summer basil. So I'm just getting the gnocchi on a low heat because I want to fry them. In another cast iron skillet, I'm just going to melt some butter and some avocado oil. For these steak bites, you want to lightly sear them on both sides. Now, depending on how you like your steak cooked, we like ours at about a medium rare. So I'm just going to brown it on all sides. You want to keep the heat fairly high on this, and you don't want to overcrowd the pan because you don't want to steam the steak bites. You just want to sear them and cook them. So what I'm doing here is they are done on that side, so I'm just going to flip them. Once they are all done, you're going to remove them from the heat and just kind of let them rest for a minute. Just let the juices kind of settle on the plate. So in the pan that I just did the gnocchi, it was done, so I took it off. I'm gonna melt some more butter and I'm gonna add my zucchini, and we're just gonna cook this on a nice low and slow heat. I wanna kind of steam it up first, but then I wanna fry it after. So here I am just taking the steak bites out of the cast iron. Back to that cast iron, I'm gonna put in about 2 tablespoons of butter and 2 teaspoons of garlic, and I'm just going to cook it until the garlic becomes fragrant. You don't wanna burn the garlic, so you just have to keep an eye on it. I usually let it cook for about 30 seconds. I'm gonna add the steak bites back to the cast iron, and I'm just going to coat them. I'm not gonna cook them. You really just want to just quickly turn that garlic butter sauce in them and just make sure they're evenly coated, and then take it right off the heat. So I plated it up. This was a really good meal. There was no seconds. That's kind of how I determine if a meal is good, is if we have leftovers or not. There was no leftovers after this night. So it's a great recipe. Next meal, I really wanted to kind of make my version of like a fast food. This meal comes together really, really quickly, and I'm using all my canned goods, and this is really why I preserve stuff, because nights like this that I'm in a hurry to get supper on the table, canned goods just come to the rescue. So I'm gonna make some green chicken enchiladas for supper tonight. What I'm doing is just taking 2 cans of my shredded chicken, and I'm just draining off the broth because I don't want it to be too watered down, so I don't want the broth in there. You can save the broth to use later on in different recipes. So I'm adding the 2 cans into this large mixing bowl. I'm putting in 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning, and then I'm adding 1 cup of sour cream, and then just probably 2 cups of cheese. I'm using a mozzarella and a cheddar cheese. So once I get it all mixed together, I'm gonna take my tortillas and I'm going to put a layer of green enchilada sauce on the tortillas, and then just put that chicken mixture in the middle there and just fold them up and put them seam side down in a 9x13 pan. I put a little bit of enchilada on the sauce on the bottom of the pan just so that these wouldn't stick. With the remaining enchilada sauce, I'm just gonna cover the top part of the enchiladas and just make sure they're good and coated. And then I'm gonna put about, probably I would say maybe 2 cups of mozzarella cheese on top of this. I have my oven preheated at 375 degrees, and I'm gonna cook these for about 25 minutes until the top is a nice golden color. So a really, really easy side to make is some refried beans. So I'm gonna use some of my home canned pinto beans. What I did there is I took about 3 tablespoons of lard and just melted it, and then I added my pinto beans in here. You can use onions if you'd like. My husband is not a fan of the texture of onions, so I just used some granulated onions in here. I added about 2 teaspoons or 1 teaspoon of minced garlic, 2 teaspoons of paprika, 2 teaspoons of cumin, and I added too much salt. I probably, next time I make this, I'm not gonna put so much in. I accidentally added 2 teaspoons of salt, which was way too much salt for this. I would say add about 1 teaspoon and test it from there, and add some pepper to it. So once I fry this for about 3 minutes, I'm gonna come in with a potato masher and just mash up the beans so that they're a nice kind of creamy but still a little lumpy texture. So those are done. Put those aside. So now I'm gonna make a quick guacamole. All I do is just take some avocados here and just slice them and then put them into this bowl, and then again I use my potato masher just kind of to mash them up a bit. We like more of a lumpy, I call it lumpy, but it just means it's not like a smooth consistency. We like to kind of taste the avocado in it. So I'm gonna add a teaspoon of garlic in there, just minced garlic, and some lime juice and some salt. And that is all. I just mix it all together. Sometimes I add cherry tomatoes in here, but because my kids are eating it, they're not a fan of like chunky tomatoes, so I left the tomatoes out. But this meal came together in literally 25 minutes and it was delicious. I'm just gonna get everything plated up here. Here's the enchiladas, just they were so good. And like, you don't need to order fast food when you can make it this quick at home. So I'm just topping my enchiladas there with the guacamole and sour cream. Perfect recipe for a quick meal. The last meal, I am going to make some banana bread. While we were on vacation, I had some bananas that I really needed to get used up by the time we got home. So I decided to make some banana muffins. This is my favorite go-to recipe. I've been making it for about 20 years and I love it. So what I'm doing is taking 2 eggs and just slightly beating them, and I'm adding 3/4 cup of granulated sugar. I'm just using a organic cane sugar. And then you're gonna add 1/2 cup of avocado oil. You can use olive oil as well, and then approximately 1 cup of mashed overripe bananas. I used about 4 smaller bananas, and then you're going to add 1/2 cup of plain yogurt or sour cream. I wanted to actually use up some kefir that I had, so I used that in here instead of yogurt. Turned out amazing. You're gonna beat that together until it is a really smooth consistency. Then in a separate small bowl, you're gonna add 2 cups of all-purpose flour. I just used an unbleached organic flour. And then you're gonna add 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Just lightly mix that together. Then you're gonna incorporate that into the wet ingredients. I just beat it until it was just incorporated. You don't want to overmix it. Once you get everything incorporated together, you're going to then either make your banana bread or muffins. But I actually wanted to kind of put a little bit of a twist to these. So I took my little hand blender and just blended up some walnuts until they were nice bite-sized pieces. And I added some semi-sweet chocolate chips, and I'm just gonna lightly beat it until, again, that's incorporated. So again, I was making this loaf into muffins because I just find muffins are easier to just kind of take on the go. So I have my oven preheated at 375 degrees, and these turned out perfect after 25 minutes. They take anywhere from 20 to 25 minutes depending on your oven. Mine tends to take a little bit longer to cook. These things turned out amazing. Like I said before, this is my go-to recipe. I really, really love it. So that is going to be the last video for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and got a little bit of inspiration for some meals for the upcoming week. I hope you have a great day or night whenever you're watching this, and I will see you on the next video. Bye, guys.